Hi, welcome back to my second video. I'm going to talk a little bit about translation equivalence, but this time instead of looking at individual words, we're going to look at sentences or how words kind of go together. So, first of all, the definition of a sentence is surprisingly complicated and can be very boring. So, I'm not going to get into it too much, but what we need to understand is what rules are there that tell us how words have to change when you put them next to each other. So we've already decided on the correct word, so we're going to call this a book rather than any other expression. We're not going to call it a textbook. We've decided to just use the word book. Um, Now we need to decide what is the verb we're going to use for opening it. And in some languages, for example, if it's male or female, masculine or feminine, we use a different verb, which you don't do in English, I think. Um, in other languages, depending on the time of day, you use different verbs, or if you used to do it with the wrong hand, you might get one verb, and with another hand, you get another verb, and it can get really complicated. And unfortunately, they're never quite equivalent. My favourite example of that is this. This is a photo of me and my lovely wife on our wedding day. And in the old days, if you're old like me, you used to take a photo and then you'd go into a dark room and you would do what we call developing the photo, which is like putting it in various liquids and moving it along. And there's no special word in it for English for what you do with a photo, but we use the word develop because it's like developing. You develop it from point A, gradually gets more and more done until it's finalized, right? So we use this word develop, but not in Chinese. In Chinese, they use the word xi, which means to wash. They wash a photo. Xi zhao pian. They wash a photo. So for them, well, in fact, logically it makes sense, right? Because you're taking that negative and you're putting it in the fluid, kind of a bit like washing it, isn't it? And then you put it in the next thing, the developer, whatever, the fixer, and then you finally get the photo. Again, the word xi is a general word that just means to wash. You xi lian means wash your face, right? But in Chinese, the word that is used for that action of getting a photo from a negative to an actual photo is called 洗照片, washing. In English, it's developing. So choosing the correct word, it's not that you're breaking a grammar rule, right? If I was to take a book and say in Spanish and use um, the wrong verb, the wrong form of the verb, because I don't know if it's male or female, we could say, okay, you haven't understood the grammar. But this isn't grammar. Washing and developing, that's not grammar. You can be grammatically correct but still wrong. That's what we call a collocation. So a word that tends to go with another word, and how it's used. So another example might be you could table a motion, for example, at a business meeting. There's so many, right? Very, very rarely do they match with what you do in the other language. I bet my life you can't table a motion. In fact, I know you can't in Chinese. You can't table it. 桌子. No, it sounds ridiculous. Um, Actually, saying that, a lot of Chinese speakers also speak English, and they'd probably in their head translate it to English and hear it in English and think, "Oh yeah, table a motion. That's a funny way to say it, but fair enough." So yeah, but the choosing the right collocation is another key skill for a good translator. You can't just take the verb develop, look it up in a dictionary. Develop is fajian in Chinese, and then you can't say, "Oh well, I'll fajian a photograph." No, you have to look up and understand the meaning of the thing. The action that you're doing is not called fajian; it's called xi. It's washing a photo, not developing, and vice versa, right? So you're not actually taking the same verb over. It's not the same word. You're using a word that describes the same thing. This is why it gets interesting. And my sense is that the closer the languages are in origin, so like if it's all Latin or whatever, Germanic, the less that's a problem. But for me, when I do my Chinese to English, they're so far apart. Knowing the source verb actually doesn't help me. Like if I was translating 洗照片 into English, knowing that 洗 means to wash, that doesn't help me. I have to know what is the English word for turning a negative into a photo. You would have to figure that out, and that's called developing. And a Chinese dictionary probably wouldn't help you very much either. So collocations, they're really important. Practical solutions that I kind of use from time to time. If you really don't know, you have to be literal, but that's 90% of the time it's wrong. Um, if you're unsure, then you read and read and read and read in the subject matter. Try and find another article that talks about a similar thing and see what verb they use. That's your best bet. If you don't know the collocation, that's probably one of the hardest things to deal with. You can sort of put it into passive or something, or avoid talking about the action. And yeah, if you've got a sentence where the point is that the photo was developed, not that we use the word developed, you can say the prepared photo was then, you know. So you're sort of cheating slightly, but sometimes that's the only thing you can do. Sometimes there just is not an equivalent. So collocation is really important, worth learning. You get to know them. I probably know a few hundred good collocations off by heart from translating from Chinese. Um, One thing I wanted to mention, there's an ISO standard about how to write for clarity in user manuals. And I can't remember the number offhand, but you can Google it. And basically it says, if you use it pretty much assumes everyone speaks Latin languages, right? It says if you use a verb in a sentence, you cannot then later use it as a noun. So if you table a motion, table is then permanently a verb in your document. You cannot later say emotion. They tabled a motion, blah 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 blah, and at the next paragraph, the table was made of oak. No, can't do it. You then have to use it only as a verb. And if you start with it as a noun, it has to only be a noun. That makes life a million times easier. But of course, no one writes like that in the real world. The more you can get your clients to write like that, the more a company writes like that, the easier it will be to translate, and the better the translations will be. And then we move into what we call a controlled language, which I'll do another video on one day. So yeah, look for collocations. Be aware that quite often they won't match. Knowing the word in the original language doesn't always help you. Sometimes it actually hinders you, believe it or not. Sometimes you're just better not seeing it, because when you see it, you think, well, how on earth is it that? What does that mean? And you end up on these crazy flights of fantasy. And this is why you only translate into your mother tongue. Collocations will, on some level in your gut, will kind of make sense in your language. In a second language, they're unlikely to kind of make sense, and you can't do that quality control. So yeah, good. Thanks, guys. Have a nice day.